So a lot of reviews for Sonic Racing Crossworlds have started to come out, probably because the embargo is lifted. And one of the things that I've been seeing a lot in reviews and seeing a lot online is people complaining about the driving and the turning and constantly running into walls unless you pick a character with high handling. And I think the bigger issue is that people don't play Sega racing games. They are very unfamiliar with the Sega driving model. And what is the Sega driving model? Well, basically, a lot of Sega AM2 games have a very consistent way of how their cars drive, how they turn, how they drift, all of these things. And they've been kind of using the same type of driving model since their early arcade days with Daytona, Sega Rally, Outrun 2. You know, there's some differences between the games, but a lot of the things are pretty consistent. And these Sonic kart racing games basically continued the tradition of using the Sega driving model, partly because Sumo Digital worked on the ports for Outrun 2, and so they had a lot of familiarity with Outrun 2 as a game. And then Sonic Racing Crossworlds is developed by Sega AM2, specifically the initial D team. So with the Sega driving model, there's a few things that are like really important to understand, and probably the most important thing, because it's a racing game, is drifting. And the thing about drifting with the Sega driving model is a thing that I like to call turn weight. And basically what this means is as you turn, the turning gets exponentially harder to do. What I mean is, as you drift, you go into a drift state, which seems obvious, but while you're in a drift state, the more that you try to manipulate your angle and steer and counter steer in the drift, the heavier your turn weight is going to get. And it's going to make it so that after a certain length of your drift, you won't be able to pull away from the wall unless you let go of your drift. So I'm going to demonstrate that right here. And if you pay attention to the controls at the top, you'll see that like as I start a turn, I'm going to pull hard left, and I'm not going to let go of the left. So I'm counter steering while in a drift, and eventually I just go into the wall because my turn weight is so heavy that no matter what I do, I'm just going to go into the wall if I keep holding my drift. So to counteract this, you'll see what I'm going to do here. Just pay attention to the controls. So you start the drift, and then you'll notice that instead of holding the turn, the counter steer, I'm just tapping it. Tap, 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 tap. And that lets me make it all the way around the bend in one drift, because I'm not manipulating my angle so much that my turn weight is getting really heavy. So the other kind of thing that people run into is these Sega racing games are really about driving angles. It's a huge part of it, which, again, seems obvious, but a problem that a lot of people will run into is because they're used to playing other racing games, they will do this, where they start their drift as the turn happens, and that just causes them to run into walls because starting your drift is basically setting your drift angle, which carries momentum with it, and you're gonna just fly into the wall. So when you know about steering weight and how the drifting works, what you want to do is what I'm doing here, which is you start your drift way ahead of the turn, and then use the steering weight and the drift angle to your advantage so that you can turn much cleaner. And so when you combine these two things, the steering weight and then your momentum and your drift angles to get your proper driving lines, I'm playing Knuckles. Knuckles has the worst handling in the demo. The setup that I'm using right now has 20 handling. I've never really had a problem making turns in this game. And consistently throughout a lot of these Sega arcade racing games, I typically pick the high-speed characters that have the worst handling, and the handling is usually plenty good. I've never really had issues making turns. But generally, it's just a matter of knowing how the driving model works, and when you do know how it works, there's no problems. I think you just have to take the game for what it is rather than trying to play it like something else. And the driving is actually like really easy. In fact, I would say that this game has much easier handling than a lot of previous Sega racing games.